For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Morning. As far as the Asia-Pacific markets are concerned, all fairly mixed this morning. Banking worries still crowding investors' minds. There is some better news. I'll come on to that when I do the US recap slightly later. As far as China is concerned, its industrial profits have fallen. There's a worry there that local government debt is rising too heavily, and it may be that they have to call on central government to help them. But there may be some kind of tax cuts. Because obviously tax increases increased during the COVID outbreak. Let's go to the IMF, which has said that risks to the financial system have increased instability within the banking. We know all this. What it's saying is it needs extra vigilance. It's Kristalina Georgieva who's been saying this. She's the head of the IMF, and they've also decreased although they've slowed their growth forecast now to 3% for 2023 globally. As far as the United States is concerned, now the big news from there is that First Citizens Bank has agreed to buy some of SVB's assets. You'll see the headlines. It's bought the bank. What it's actually bought is its client list and also its loans as well. So it's debts and loans and client list. That's what it's actually bought. It hasn't cherry picked it. It's just underpinning it, and that's helped the market considerably. Deposits withdrawals have actually slowed down, according to JP Morgan Chase, and also to Goldman's, and the US authorities are considering expanding their emergency program to other banks as well. So basically, not bad news coming from the United States, should stem some of the panic about the banking crisis there. Today we're going to hear from the Dallas Fed chief, and we're also going to hear from the Dallas Fed governor, Philip Jefferson, who may give us further news on where interest rates are going in the United States. Let's turn our attention to the European Union. Deutsche Bank fell down about 8% on Friday, finally down 14% at one particular stage. It's not another Credit Suisse. That's what the authorities are actually saying. However, in Germany, they are now striking over, the public sector unions are striking over pay because of rapidly rising inflation, and that means mass transport and airline operations will gradually be brought to a halt today. In the UK, there's more worries about the banking sector. Generally, there are fears now from the City of London this may result in tighter regulation. And again, the balance here between making London somewhere you actually want to use a financial centre and also tighter regulation is something which is worrying a lot of politicians, including the UK's finance minister. Barclays has raised its terminal base rate forecast to 4.5%. It's 4.25% now. Suspects there will be another rise in May to 4.5%. But what it doesn't say is when this cycle is due to finish. But anyway, it's raising its prospects there. The new president, Martha Lane Fox, she was one of the dot-com heroes, has actually been saying now that the British Chambers of Commerce business confidence is an all-time low. The government needs to do a lot more. Jeremy Hunt thought he'd solved a bit of that in his budget, but according to the British Chambers of Commerce, no. And what this means is there's less business investment than there ought to be. Staying with the UK, and the energy companies are, and again, this is the problem with windfall taxes. I've often touched on this in the past, that it's all right when you have windfall taxes, when the likes of Shell and BP are getting record $39 billion, $27 billion respectively profits coming in, but when energy prices actually fall, they don't do this. So they're saying, can they have a relaxation of the windfall tax rules? We'll see about that. If you remember, the last autumn, a 25% windfall tax on profits was imposed by the UK government. Oil prices have fallen again. Traders have not been buying on the dip either, as they often do. They're simply worried about the global picture of global growth. And it may not pick up. Again, China really undefined at the moment. And gold, well, we're going to hear from James Bullard, who yesterday said that he felt that interest rates should continue to rise in the United States. If that means they do, then that means a stronger dollar, and that means that gold falls down, and that's what's happened this morning. That's the global view for a Monday morning.
Okay, I mean, I'd like to go back to the interest rate issue because, yeah, it's so quick for people to say, yes, we want the interest rate to continue to rise. And, yeah, they make the textbook argument that the way to solve problems of inflation, or one of the silver bullets for inflation, is interest rate rises. But does it really solve the problem, as we're seeing in America? Because we're having a knock-on effect that is triggering everything around the world. The American government had to come out to bail out the bank, the Silicon Valley Bank. And there was a ricochet effect in other parts of the world that people had to douse down. And a lot of people are saying the banks are not out of the wood yet. So where are we going to have a balancing act?
Well, you talk about truly, and you talk about really. Those words, mean a lot to us as journalists. Obviously, they don't mean a great deal to the financial markets, which exist on fear and greed, basically, as you know. So what's happening with the financial markets is that the worries about the banks falling and failing are still there as far as investing is concerned, because that's what they worry about. But the likes of you and me perhaps should go for the truth, and the truth, what we think is that the central banks are propping up the bank sector at the moment. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying this is what appears to be happening. This is a greater truth that investors are getting to. Investors are operating very skittishly at the moment, and you and I should not be doing that. We should be looking at the basics. And the basics appear to be that central banks, or indeed other banks, as First Republic shows in the United States, are actually stepping in to support Goldman Sachs and the other big ones buying off the golden parts of the various regional banks that appear to be slightly worried about this. So basically, the financial sector at the moment appears to be trying to fix itself. It'll be very difficult. It'll be a very bumpy road, but that's what they're trying to do. So as far as interest rates are concerned, unfortunately, you're right, of course. This is a clumsy instrument, but it's all that monetary policy has. There is nothing else.
Yeah. Well, let me just take you further a bit on that, because Andrew Bailey in the UK has said that raising prices inflation would rise and also affect living costs for ordinary people living in the UK, and of course this would apply in other parts of the world as well. He's also looked at, or what's also been looked at, is the impact on certain sectors, especially in food inflation. So look at the restaurant business in the UK, for instance, where they talk about the fact that restaurant owners have come up to say that they are struggling. They are basically struggling because prices have gone up. They're trying to run a business, and it's almost not sustainable. And how long will this go? Bearing in mind that the energy palliative will come, would be reduced in April. So what is the option? What are options available for businesses to still continue to thrive, despite the fact that costs are rising, prices are going up, inflation is high?
Let's leave restaurants and the food business out of things, because the government, whatever you think about it, the economists say that really is so febrile that what we should be worried about is core inflation, and the balancing act that you quite rightly refer to is, do you go for getting control of inflation first and then going for the encouraging the economy, which you can actually do. You can do that by a combination of fiscal and monetary policy without any problem at all. It's a question of timing. When do you actually do it? And that's what these people get paid the big bucks for. But Andrew Bailey, as the Bank of England, asking manufacturers to reduce prices or to keep prices steady. I mean, I had to laugh when I read that. What other central banker would be saying that to people? They're saying, sure, but have you ever run a business? Do you understand what's going on? You understand that input prices are rising. Therefore, we have to test rising prices against what consumers actually want. I mean, this is basic page one retail stuff. And he's actually asking people to reduce prices. I'm sorry, but, if I didn't cry, I'd laugh at that, because that's so basic. And who's going to take any notice of that? What we appear to be seeing, the very best of all this, is a lot of control by the UK central bank on what's going on, and we see maybe a peak of interest rates at 4.5%, which is what Barclays brought this to you earlier on, appear to be saying right now. But it's a very, very, doing it day by day, it's very, very difficult to say exactly what's going on. If you think central banks are in control of things, that's fine. But central bank governors do not say to people, unless they want to become the object of ridicule, keep your prices down.
Well, the slight decline that we saw in the yellow metal at the end of last Friday's trading, does that have anything to do with the banking crisis? Because, I mean, gold has been doing well consecutively for about 4 weeks. Then only on Friday did we have that slight drop. That's one. The second thing, I stumbled on a study which says China and Russia top list of states with a trade surplus. China and Russia are the top there. So contrary to some of the things we read, it looks like despite the war, despite the international sanctions, Russia's economy still appears to be very healthy because, the study was reporting very good balance, positive balance. The other things I would have loved to talk about, maybe you don't want to talk about them, politics, the SNP leadership race, the replacement for Nicola Sturgeon today. I see that the Labour Party has been showing some excitement, how that could be an advantage. Well, we'll see. And then, of course, Honduras, establishing bilateral relations with China. What is Honduras looking for? What is in it? Are they looking for economic assistance? Or is it just an attempt to embarrass the United States ahead of the visit to Central America and North America by the Taiwanese leader?
I don't know anything about Honduras and China. I've not looked at that this morning. And all I could say about that is that if they're expecting an easy deal from China, think again, because they won't get it. They may get money. Where they are actually positioning themselves politically, I don't know. I'd say similarly about the SNP as well. I mean, I have nothing to say about that apart from the fact that if Scotland wants independence, and this is the dreadful word in all this, it's the same with the ANC in South Africa, the word national. That's what the N stands for, and this is the problem with SNP and the problem with ANC as well. It's too related to the existence and the so-called freedom of an individual country. All I can say, I don't know the ins and outs of the SNP. Quite honestly, all I would look at is the economic case for it separating from the UK. And if it wishes to do that, then good luck. But the questions, number one, what's going to happen to the Barnett formula? I trust you know what that is. In other words, taxpayers like me pay to keep Scotland going. Number two, where's the oil revenue going to come from? Do they think that the oil's owned by Scotland? No, of course it isn't. C, what currency will they be using? And if it's the euro, D, will the EU accept their membership? I doubt it very much indeed. Those are the only questions. As far as the politics is concerned, I have no idea where that's going. I know what the issues are, but in terms of the reality, which is about an economic case, that's where we go. What were your other two questions? G, what was the other question?
Russia. Topping.
Yeah, well, again, the word appear is very large in that kind of question. No idea what's going on there. I know they feel as though they depend upon each other, and I know that Xi Jinping met Putin and made all the right noises, but I don't think that China's in it for nothing. They're taking cheap Russian oil. You have to ask yourself the question, is $40 a barrel enough to cover production costs in Russia? I doubt it very much indeed. These are the only clues that we have to what's going on in that country. The bigger question about Russia is, what kind of Russia do we want after all this? And I mean, if you read what's going on militarily, it's in a benighted state. It's using Second World War tanks, for example, so I'm told, against much higher techs. A bullet from a rifle would go through the armor on a Second World War tank. It's exactly, if you want to go back in the history books, you look at the 1942 Battle of Battle of Kursk, and see what a disaster that was. The Russians, old-fashioned machinery coming against the Nazis in much better tanks. So I have no, I mean, again, you ask these questions, I have no idea. The word appear is very large in all that, but we don't really know what's happening in China, and we certainly don't know what's happening in Russia. But, good luck to both of them. But make no mistake that the only certainty that I take from all this is China does not look at a country like Russia and say, oh, we'll give you some help with no strings attached. No, of course it doesn't.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. Now, for business updates across the African continent, Rotus Odiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Morning, everybody. Good morning to you. Good morning to all our viewers. We begin with cash. Yes, everybody. We begin with cash. Banks over the weekend opened up in Nigeria to try to ease the Naira note scarcity. Also loading up ATMs. It's going to be a very crucial week this week. You remember the central bank, did say that the banks should open up over the weekend in order to be able to have people get access to those notes. So, not all of them opened, but a decent number of them did open up. And so this week is going to be very, very important with respect to people being able to get access to cash. I mean, we're at the tail end of March now, about to start Q2 with April just a few days away. So pretty important that we get this going. And again, I am really, really looking forward to seeing those Q1 GDP figures to see how things turn out. Fuel subsidies. There was a stakeholders online meeting forum called Nigeria Downstream Deregulation the day after, where stakeholders, I think it was with the African Refiners and Petroleum Distributors Association or so, where they're forecasting that fuel will go to 750. Now, this sounds more accurate than, I think, a headline we saw a few months ago. They said it would be 400. How is it going to be 400 when your landing cost is pushing 300 naira? So this is more accurate. Now, if I take you back to the Monetary Policy Committee meeting and the food supply shocks that the central bank governor was pointing to with respect to why food inflation continues to climb. Number one there is increase in road transportation costs, and then you've got legacy challenges. But if you focus on the number one item there, if you get fuel at 750 naira per litre, you can imagine what that is going to do to pretty much everything else as far as the pass-through effect is concerned. You bring in the fuel to the ports, you're using trucks, ironically, which are powered by diesel. That one has its own 300% increase. They've got to now distribute the fuel across the country. We have a pipeline infrastructure. Unfortunately, that's not working. We don't have rail to get the fuel across. So, well, we do have rail, but it's just 96% of movement of goods in this country is by road. So if you get 750 naira per litre fuel, you are going to, or even higher, depending on how oil prices move, you will see that increase here, and that will transfer to food. That will just filter through. So the clock is ticking on the new administration with that June deadline, right after 30 days after they get sworn in, to when provisions for fuel subsidies are done, and they either yank it off or they move it in bits and pieces. But even if they move it in bits and pieces, they're still going to get an issue with where marketers will be adjusting prices upwards because of what they expect. So that's there. Anambra State, I think it was on Friday or over the weekend, Governor Soludo, who just celebrated a year in office, signed an MOU with the Enugu Electricity Distribution Company in order to try to get increased electricity supply. Ever since President Buhari made that amendment to the constitution, you've seen Lagos State come out with Babajide Sanwo-Olu, recently re-elected, who had a full thread on Lagos State's plans to provide power to Lagos State citizens. And now you've got Anambra State as well. Now, however, the EEDC did point out that there is a 37 billion naira is what is needed in order to close Anambra's metering gap. We've continued to have this issue with prepaid meters in order to know and track exactly how much power people are using. We had the meter assets program where we're still trying to produce them locally, but we still have to import them as well. They reduced duties on them, and so on and so forth. But that metering gap, which for Nigeria is still in the millions, is still there. You have to sort out the metering issue to track how much power people are using so you can charge them appropriately, because estimated billing is an absolute throat slasher for people because they're just estimating. So this is something that needs to be addressed. So this is a good move, but in all honesty, they really have to focus on the infrastructure, the transmission company of Nigeria, the whole issue with where the potential is for transmitting power, and then you've got the issues with gas, cost reflective tariffs, where states now can independently charge what they want. But this whole issue of metering, you've got to get the infrastructure in place. So this is good, but as EEDC they said there, 37 billion is what Anambra, and that's just Anambra alone. So now go ahead and look at the rest of the states. Speaking of the rest of the states, I haven't gone through this entire report yet, but the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council has released their 2023 Ease of Doing Business report, and Gombe State continues to remain number 1. Jigawa was number 2, Sokoto number 3. As far as regions, Plateau State was the top for the North Central, Gombe, as I just mentioned, top for Northeast, Jigawa for Northwest, Anambra, we just talked about, was top among Southeast, Rivers State in the South-South, and Ekiti State in the Southwest. There has, however, been marginal improvement overall with ease of doing business since they put out their first report, either it was 2020 or 2021. The baseline movement there, people are still not generally satisfied with ease of doing business in Nigeria. And the top 2 concerns continue to remain infrastructure and a stable environment with respect to safety.
And it has to be said, we need that stable environment. And those are pretty much the legacy issues, infrastructure. But the good thing about infrastructure is that if we harness our resource better, and that's why we should talk more about governance, not the shenanigans of politicians. If we harness our resource better, we can get the private sector to pay for the infrastructure. That's where it's done everywhere in the world. Rotus, I keep citing the story of Warri. I know you're a Warri boy.
Yes, indeed.
But I saw with my own eyes the impact of the private sector in Warri. The oil companies that were there, impacting the economy. They built the airport. It was Osubi airstrip before.
Yep.
That finally became airport. It was Shell. That put that in place. And that's why you see Delta State today, I think it's about the only, you can fact check me or correct me if I'm wrong, that has got 2 airports. They've got one in Asaba and they've got one in Warri. The impact of the private sector. So let's look at how we can make that collaborative. Concerning subsidies, Rotus, I see all you have said. There's going to be forex problem, many challenges here and there as regards landing costs. But the way forward is, like I said this morning, Nigeria can be a net exporter of refined petrol in 10 years. What do? We need to incentivize the local sector, ensure that modular refineries get crude to buy in Naira, not in dollars, which is a big problem now.
It's a big one.
And some other incentives for that sector. I think that sector can erupt. We've got the capacity. We can do it in this country. But we need to put our ass together, and that's why leadership matters.
Indeed.
Talking about leadership, I must say commendations to both the Lagos State Governor and the Anambra State Government for being proactive in terms of the actualization of a 24-hour state in both, in terms of sustainably being able to provide electricity, power to their citizens. However, you've identified, the costs of this project. In Anambra, it's 37 billion naira if this would go forward. And you talk about, if we're to cascade that to other states in Nigeria, it would be interesting to understand, number 1, the cost, and number 2, how the governors are looking to generate or source the funding for, to achieve that. Number 3 is also if it's a priority for any of the governors. At least, these 2 states they understand the importance. And I have to say for Anambra in particular, if we're going to industrialize the state in terms of the potentials, then we must talk about the provision of power.
Oh, yes.
Because when we look at businesses, the cost of business in Nigeria, we look at the infrastructure that's not available or what's the capacity of these states, one of which, a key part, is power. If we can get that right,
Your GDP will climb.
I'm hoping that other states
will go down.
Well,
businesses will...
Let me comment on Governor Soludo and electricity in Anambra. You recall that part of his promise to the people of Anambra is that it's not a good thing that Anambra State produces all these millionaires and billionaires that are doing well outside the state, in other parts of the country, but that it will create incentives, opportunities for Anambra millionaires and billionaires to come home and invest. And he made electricity one of his major priorities. And this is why in Anambra State, they are constructing a 132 kVA power station in Aguleri to supply electricity in Anambra East, Anambra North, and all of that. And then Soludo had also promised to provide about 250,000 street lights across the state by June this year. Incidentally, he's been 1 year in office. He's been celebrating. And then you have this signing of a memorandum of understanding with the Enugu Electricity Development Company. What has made all this possible also is that electricity is now on the concurrent list in the Constitution. And as a result of the 5th Alteration Bill number 33, which, President Buhari signed into law about a week ago. So we hope that other states will also take advantage of that law, because now states can generate electricity, they can distribute, they can transmit. They don't have to go to the national grid. Okay, maybe the capacity is for a mini grid, but once we see this, the advantage will be for the people in those affected states in terms of, productivity, in terms of generating economic growth, and we hope that Governor Soludo will remain consistent. As he said on Saturday, he said, he's done this, he's done that, he will do more. Let's hope that other states will take advantage of the alteration of that 1999 Constitution.
Indeed, we hope so.
Well, thank you very much.